Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual town hall. I'm out in Keithville right now at my dad's house. It's been quite a morning. I went to a street dedication, and then after that, I went to meet with canvassers up in north part of the city. And I got home a few minutes ago and got set up, and it took me a second. I was scrambling a little bit more than I meant to be, but we're all together now, and that's what it's about. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to get to speak with you today. I know that it's raining in parts of the city already, but not all over. And we didn't want to get caught out in the rain, which is why we rescheduled. And I'd hate to have to do that, but it made more sense to reschedule for a day that's hopefully going to be rain-free and hopefully really temperate so we can have a good time. But to still be able to use this time to speak with you today. For those of you who don't know, I am LeVette Fuller. I'm the city councilwoman for District B in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I am running for mayor of Shreveport because we cannot wait for the sort of comprehensive changes that we need to see across the board in our city. And I sincerely believe that I have the best vision for this community to move it forward and to actually change the culture of how we do business as a city, not just for the city with business, but how we serve the public. For me, public service is not about looking at the public as just customers, as consumers. People who go into public service, for the most part, were called. And your calling into public service in any position is basically to be a part of creating improved quality of life circumstances for all of our neighbors, whether you're working in a library, whether you're in medicine, whether you're a postal worker. If you understand the pivotal role that you play in this community, we don't have to worry about the packaging. The issue that we have when it comes to morale in this community with our public servants at the city level, it's not about the packaging. It's not about the product. It's about the motivation for the product. When people feel appreciated, when they have an understanding that their leadership understands the pivotal role that each of us plays, no matter how small other people think our jobs are, or how big we think they are, we're all working together, not in a business, but in a breathing, living organism that is the organization of our city. There's so many different moving parts that we have to look out for. And this doesn't do us any good. It does us a disservice to just look at it as a business instead of an administration with several different things. It really is an organism with lots of things evolving all the time. The way that we work together as community members, the way that we interface with technology, the way that we deal with our environment and all of the changes in our environment, that's more than just a balance sheet. And each of us plays a part in it, whether we're working inside the city or if we're just a part of the community. And to that end, we owe it to ourselves to do our best, to appreciate those things as well, to have leaders that appreciate all of what we do, no matter how big or how small, and people that really believe in this community more than just to be inert potential without any motivating factors, a catalyst to actually bring that potential into being real energy that is dynamic and that is being used to bring things to fruition. It's just stagnation. And for the longest time, all we have seen or said about Shreveport is there's so much potential. There's so much potential. We're more than potential. We're as big as whatever we believe we can be. And so instead of us sitting back, seeing things kind of happen and being disappointed when they don't quite happen, and also kind of feeling like, see, we knew this wasn't going to go anywhere, we all have an opportunity, we all have a responsibility to dig deep and to really, really actually push for the things that we want to see in our community. Great cities don't just happen. Great cities happen because community members get together and say, we can do this. We believe that this city can be something amazing, and we're going to make those amazing things happen because we deserve nice things for ourselves and for future generations. And I think that we have a big chance right now. And I think that this might be, I don't know, the most pivotal point in our democracy, not just for this city, but for this country, to actually say Shreveport has the capacity to be a city of 500,000 people without ever growing our boundaries again. That Shreveport can be a place that is friendly, that is welcoming, where people have a heart for service, where people are kind to each other, where people can learn to trust each other and live side by side, regardless of their religion, their creed, their race, their socioeconomic status. It happens in pockets across the city always, all the time, but we don't celebrate that. We're too busy lamenting what we don't think we have instead of celebrating what we do have. And if we celebrate what we do have, we can have more of it. That's it. Like, there's so much more. I have lots of ideas about how to achieve those things that are very brass tacks, that are very much about the nuts and bolts of infrastructure, the nuts and bolts of budgeting, the nuts and bolts of public safety, the nuts and bolts of having the businesses that are here thriving and inviting more businesses to the table. But before I start to get into that, I'm going to just check the comments and see if y'all have anything that you want to say or want to add. Oh, Mr. Trudeau, your speech is my idea of a call to right action. I'll take it. Thank you for that. It is a call to action. I think that the one thing that we have to continually do is act. It's kind of, I kind of got mocked. We had a public safety town hall at Caddo Magnet after a significant death, a violent death of a 12-year-old in our community. And one thing that I said was, quite often we'll see something that we think needs to be done and we'll think, well, someone should do that. Someone should take care of that. Someone should handle that. And I said, well, you're someone. All of us are. If you see something as simple as just a piece of paper on the ground and you think that someone else should pick it up, no, you're someone. If you think, oh, well, we pay people to do that instead of, as a citizen, I can lighten their load by throwing that away. That might seem so sophomoric, so juvenile even, but the thing is, it's the truth. When we can handle the little things on our own, we make light work of those things, and then we can really focus our big energy on the things that need it. Like, we can really focus in sophisticated ways on the issues that need sophisticated solutions. But we all have to want to do our part, and we all have to think, my neighbor deserves to have a clean street. I deserve to have a clean street. I'm considerate enough that I'm going to do my part. Are there any questions? Do I need to scroll up? And Chris or Stephen, if there's something I'm not seeing, please let me know. Just ask the questions for me and tell me what they are so I'm not trying to read.
Yes, so you have a question currently. The first one is from Mr. Zachary Fink, and he says, hello, I have a question. In the announcement of the new infrastructure grant from the federal government, the current administration mentioned improving bike infrastructure. This feels farcical since the current bike infrastructure is basically non-existent. Is there a way to convince fiscal conservatives and NIMBYs to allow the progress and sacrifice needed to actually create proper bike infrastructure?
I think it's interesting that you bring up the NIMBYs when it comes to bike infrastructure. And when it comes to conservatives, I think that if people realize that bike infrastructure encourages economic development, where there are bike lanes, people spend more money. But the converse of that could be where there are bike lanes, there may also be invitations to gentrification. What we need to do is go back to the original bike master plan that was done with funding from the Caddo Parish Commission and look at the routes that we said were desired areas that we wanted to increase bike infrastructure. That's the first thing, is we already have some areas that are pinpointed that would be great for bike infrastructure. Now, one thing about this when it comes to the economics of it, the more cars you have on the street, the more wear and tear you have on the street. If you have a diverse set of transportation options, you actually relieve the burden of the roads, and then you're making fewer repairs to those roads. And I think that's how we go about convincing people that it's a good thing to do when it comes to economic development. Now, some people will say, Shreveport's so hot in the summer and it rains so often that you're really limited on when you can feasibly be on a bike. But even in the heat of the summer, the coolest hours of the days if people are trying to commute by bike are going to be dusk and dawn, right? So if you're choosing, or if your circumstances are choosing for you to be on a bike, we should be making it as safe as possible so you can make those choices for yourself regardless of what the temperatures are. And a lot of bike people are really, really resilient. I think that where Shreveport has an issue outside of just getting community buy-in, there are a couple of different types of people when it comes to bicycling. There are novel riders like me that have like the cute pink cruiser that's a commuter bike, but that comes out every once in a while to like bike to brunch or bike to get an ice cream cone. And then people like me are also a little bit tentative about riding with traffic. Someone like me who's on a bike every once in a while would ride more if you have more bike infrastructure that has protected bike lanes, or if we have more education about what a bike's rights are legally. But we're reluctant because we feel a little nervous about riding with traffic, right? But then you have people who treat their bodies like cars, and those cyclists quite often don't have the patience to advocate for riders like me. And so until we have like a shared vocabulary for passion and energy around that, it's going to be difficult to talk to people that are just completely naysayers. So I think that the biggest role in this is going to be our bike coalitions that do the critical mass rides, that are advocating and understanding policy and are looking at best practices across the country. That is how we will actually be able to turn the corner on the conversation that we're having, that plus looking truly at the economic return on investments, which is what appeals to people that are fiscally conservative. If they look at it and say this is a waste of money, but if you can show a real cost savings on the roads, on the road repairs, but also where those economic vibrant spots happen where there's bike lanes and where there's more sidewalks, because it's not just biking. Pedestrians have a big role to play in this too, where you can see those return on investments or potential return on investments. That's when you can start to see people who are worried about the money, see the shift in their mindsets about it because of the ROI that we get out of it. Let me know if I answered your question or if I went around the world. Zach, yeah.
All right, while Zach takes his time to respond in the chat, I'm gonna go ahead and read Desmond Perkinson's question, and then we'll keep going down in that order. So Desmond says, is there any way Shreveport could get the same law/tax treatment as living in Texas? Texarkana, Arkansas residents are taxed like they live in Texas. Such a system would need Louisiana legislative approval, but it might stop the outward migration.
So when we start talking about our tax structure, that is going to be something directly linked to the legislature. And as mayor, I will do my part to lobby for changes that will be helpful to us, because there might be some truth to what you're saying, Mr. Perkins, but that is going to fall not just on the legislature, but it may actually fall directly on our Constitution. And I think that what you see happening is certain of our representatives have tried to make incremental changes. They tried to get things put on the ballot, because if it's an amendment that we have to our Constitution, that's something that the entire state would have to vote on. The issue there is education. Whenever those initiatives show up on a ballot, they're so confusing. And if you haven't been researching it or found some sort of website that has demystified what those things actually say and then done the policy analysis so you know what you're really voting on, they either continue to fail or we pass something that we literally just have no idea what we've done. To that end, I think that we need to see policy analysis at the local and state level that can help to advocate for the changes that will be good for the entire state. And then we have to lobby our legislators to vote the way we want them to vote as far as putting things on the ballot. And then we have to educate our neighbors to make sure that we're passing the right amendments so that we can see if those things will really be a reality and give us the sort of vitality that you see in Texas.
All right, and Desmond, if you have any further questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, but I'll go on to the next question. So LaMary asked, how are you planning to work with the council?
That's a great question. As a sitting council person now, I can tell you that, I'm gonna say councilwoman, I like being a councilwoman. So as a councilwoman now, I can tell you that often we think of it as all you have to do on the council when it comes to passing legislation is count to four. And mayors often think, oh, if I have four votes, I can do whatever it is I want to do. What you have to have with your city council as mayor is trust and respect and transparency. What I do not want to do is horse trading to whip votes. And by that, I mean not saying, hey, what can I do for you that will be helpful to your community? I want to be able to do things that council members know are good for their districts, because they are going to be the finger on the pulse of what's right for their districts. What I'm saying is I will never try to actively use one city council person against another in order to gain consensus, when I can be transparent and consistent with everyone and create relationships built on respect so that we can all meet common goals. I think that it's important that if I have an idea for something to go forward for the city, that I approach it with respect to all 7 council members and say, this is what I would like to do. Share with me your thoughts, share with me your concerns, bring those concerns truly to the table so that if there's friction, if there's something that's missing the mark, we can go back to the drawing board and get it right. I like the phrase measure twice, cut once. We have to be able to say, I want to do this particular huge initiative, and I think that it might end up taking a bond. What do you think? Let's study it. I like this part of what you're doing, but not this part. I think that this part will have this unintended consequence. Let's work that out. Instead of trying to do something quick and dirty, making a mistake, and then later down the line, wishing you'd done something different, bring all of the ideas to the table, bring all of the insights to the table of people that might think differently than you on the council, and try to get it right. Rather than just saying, well, if I've got 4 votes, it doesn't matter what the other 3 think. That's something that causes discord. And even if it changes from topic to topic, you're creating a toxic environment, and then you can't move the city forward. The other piece in that is going to be the public. I've noticed that sometimes the best way to get results isn't necessarily in a back and forth over email or phone, but going directly to the public and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Talk to your council member. Tell them how do you want this to go? Because the thing about me is there have been several controversial issues that have come up in the last 4 years. And while it might be hard to leave me a voicemail because my voicemail fills up fast, if you get me on the phone, I'm going to give you 20 to 30 minutes to hear you out. And if you've got ideas about what we're doing, I'm going to listen to you. If I disagree, I'm going to tell you exactly why I disagree. I'm going to be open-minded about it. And I have been known to actually fine-tune my thoughts on something in order to get a good result that benefits the most people. Seriously, when you come to us, that should affect how we feel. The trash fees is a perfect example. We started off with an $18 trash fee that was going to be attached to our water bills. And right now, you know that our water bills have fluctuated. We've already been sued in class action suits over our water bills. So for me, it was an $18 fee over 12 months is a sizable issue for someone on a fixed income, right? That's one part of it. And the other part is we've had some really weird inconsistencies with our water billing. It makes it really, really hard and gives me heartburn to think that we would add another thing to that on top of the $250 recycling that we had at that point. But a pin in the recycling, someone will ask about it later. So here's the thing. You all called me and you said, I can pay the $18, but I worry about my neighbor down the street on a fixed income. Or you called me and said, I'm on a fixed income. I simply cannot pay that. And some of you have said, not only can I not pay it, I don't trust you with my money right now. And that is why I voted against the trash fee. Not because I didn't believe that public workers in solid waste deserved a raise. They absolutely do. We needed $400,000 to make that raise. That's much less than the $18 or the $7 a month that we ultimately ended up with. But what we also were trying to do, which was the part B to the conversation, was add more money to our general reserves because we were at about negative $1.2 million. And your debt to revenue ratios affect your ability to borrow money. So when I can, and what I will always want to do and what I will always try to do is consistently in a trusting, respectful way, be transparent and work with the council. But I will always leverage the voice of the people against not just myself, but all 7 of them too, because I always want to be someone that listens to the people. Let me know if you have a follow-up to that, because I know that I can go on tangents.
All right, so we've gotten a few more good questions coming in. First, just a general comment. Robert Trudeau says, doing our part takes somewhat of a leap of faith. It takes a mindset not common to this area to pick up bits of trash and to give our neighbors some slack. Zach goes on to follow up this question about the bike lanes. Do you see a future where the city would use eminent domain to increase the width of roads for bike lanes?
At this juncture, I can't say that I see that, just to be really candid. I think that it's always an option, but I think that if we're going to do eminent domain in order to widen streets for bike lanes, that we'd also be doing strategic planning to take in green infrastructure that allows us to make changes to our drainage. And I think that we'd also be looking at the sidewalks in areas that may not already have sidewalks. I think that expropriation, eminent domain is something that would be on the table because it is something legally we can do, but I can't see us doing it just for bike lanes without looking at like a full strategic plan for other things that could be a positive impact on a community. And I want to go back and say, yeah, I mean, cutting people slack, I don't mean to sound like I'm reproaching people for not doing the little bits, because yes, it is kind of something that takes a leap of faith. What I will say is that we sometimes need to hold a mirror up to ourselves and say, hey, those of us who really do feel the obligations and have been leaders in this community, maybe we are doing our part, but maybe we should just do that little bit more. The people who have the privilege of being able to say, I am thankful for what I have. I understand the privileges that I have. What can I do to alleviate the suffering of someone else? Even if it's the next smallest little thing, we should just keep doing those little things. And even that, I don't mean that as a reproach or a reprimand. I think it's just a matter of taking an inventory on where we are. And it is definitely a leap of faith. In fact, what I like to go back to, and you all can Google this, if you can't find it, I'll try to find it and post it for you. Dr. William Hull wrote, he was the pastor of First Baptist of Shreveport in the July 3rd, 1977. His sermon was called Shreveport at the Crossroads. Now, there had been a lot of things going on in our history at that point, but his point in that sermon was that Shreveport was at a crossroads about deciding what kind of city it wanted to be. We could open our hearts, open our minds, open our doors, or we could close off into gates, close off into silos, and just look out for our own. And if you look at where we are right now, I think that some of us have tried to be open, but that the general momentum here has been toward closing off, and that a lot of what you see as scarcity is not so much because of true scarcity as much as a scarcity mindset. If there's questions about that, feel free to put a follow-up if you want to have that discussion, but I don't want to shortchange anybody else's questions because I ramble.
All right, so Robert Trudeau asked, how do we leverage our good actors into widespread participation?
There's a great TED Talk, there's probably more than one, called Starting a Movement. And I don't mean to be goofy, but the thing is, sometimes levity helps us to find the good feelings that help us to spread more good feelings. And I think that if we're able to really capture the essence of how good it feels to do good things, it does spread like a pandemic. Seriously, I think that the positivity that you see and continuing to focus on those things and saying, hey, sometimes it's just the tangible. It's here's the before, here's the after. I'm not doing this to get a cookie. I just want you to see how much better it looks. Here's the big trash pile. Here's the area here's the area out on the bayou that we cleaned up. Here's the walking trail that we put in by the river. Look at how much good it's doing for people. And then following up, look how many more people are using this walking trail and how well we're keeping it up. Where can we do the next one? When people see the positive benefits of something, they truly do want to be a part of it. They want to replicate those things. One example that's not really the city, but it's a really great leverage of nonprofit funds and parish funds to some degree, I believe. The Volunteers for Youth Justice have a program at University Elementary that is doing a lot of wraparound services that help families, that help students, and they have de-escalated a lot of a lot of behavioral issues that are basically kind of residual effects of trauma. So if you're able to keep a kid in a classroom instead of having them detained, if you're seeing fewer referrals for bad acting, for acting out in class, if you're able to help a family to get past truancy by following up with a family to make sure they're accountable and the kids are always getting to school, you see grades go up, you see behavior better, you see more interaction because people are all working together. It's a really exciting thing, but now that people are seeing the numbers on it, they're ready to scale it. They're ready to take it to the next school and see if they can have another positive impact.
All right, so we have a question from Victoria Pouncey. What is your plan on gun violence, gun control, and overall violence in Shreveport?
There's a couple of things that have to be done, and it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of all of the above. All of the above is not going to just center on public safety as police. That's just one piece of it. It's a big piece of it. People have to be accountable for their actions, and there have to be consequences. A piece that I have an opinion about, but is not under my control, is that a lot of times when there are more than one or two charges, the gun charges are getting kicked out. Gun charges need to be hard charges. When someone is arrested and there's a gun charge, the gun charge cannot get thrown out. There should be penalties for those gun crimes. We need to get guns off the street. Gun buy-out programs are an excellent way for us to attempt to do that. We have to actually follow up when there have been robberies of things like of pawn shops. We have to have PSAs so that people remember you can't just leave your gun in your unlocked car, locking your guns up, having good gun practices for gun safety in your household. But it's not about trying to blame the victims. That's not it at all. When it comes to violence happening in specific neighborhoods, we've already seen that when we clean up the blight in those neighborhoods, that you can see a noticeable point drop in crime. You can see where there is increased morale, increased mental health, positive mental health changes, and you do see violent crime decrease at the same time. So all of the above, holding criminals accountable, getting guns off the street, securing guns for law-abiding gun owners and having just good awareness and literacy about that, and cleaning up our neighborhoods, those things. But let's not forget that where there are lacking opportunities and increasing poverty, you're going to have violent crime. So all of these things also make us a more fertile environment for job creation. So it's those things together. It's not either or. It's not just one piece. It's all of the above. But one thing that I'm very, very fond of is the studies that are showing that looking at violent crime as a public health epidemic that is contagious is something that we need to focus on. And I believe that working with public-private partnerships with our nonprofits, not necessarily public funding, even though there could be a public investment at some point, you bring in public health practitioners to figure out where your patient zeros are, and they create the programs that will help people to either stop the violence from happening or to remove themselves from those environments. And it takes all members of a community to be a part of it. If the problem is the trauma and the PTSD, we need mental health care for that. If the issue is the violence has happened and there's very strong potential for retaliation, then we need to stop that through intelligence, through police intelligence, to stop that retaliation before it can happen. And that's going to be partially the public safety part, but it's also going to be back to the boots on the ground, frontline mental health advocates who can actually step in and say, hey, what you're experiencing isn't normal. What can we do to change your circumstances so that you are not being completely inundated by violence? If it's happening in your house, if it's your brother, sister, child that's part of this issue, what resources do they need to remove them from that activity? That's one. Is your child not directly impacted, but they've got insomnia, their PTSD because the shooting happened next door, they're going to school and they're acting out, they're having violent mood swings, they need help too. The contagion is like this butterfly effect where it's literally affecting everyone in the environment where the violence is happening. And if you look at a heat map of violent crime in Shreveport, you're going to see that the overlapping heat map of where the violent crime is happening, these little hot spots where it's happening, are also going to be areas that are definitely burdened with poverty, blight, lack of hope, lack of opportunities. It's not just the one thing. We have to tackle all of these things together. We have to have the right people who care about all of these issues working in their wheelhouse, but all coming together outside of their silos.
All right, thank you. So we have a question from, well, first we have a nice comment from LaMary. Perfect analogy, horse trading to whip votes, transparency and mutual trust and respect is imperative for true progress. Thank you, Councilwoman. Van Lee says, how do you plan to work with Sheriff Prater and Interim Chief Smith to implement an independent police monitor and other reforms?
An independent police monitor, it won't be so much about working with Sheriff Prater and the chief. It is to a degree, but it's also about possibly the state legislature, possibly civil service. Our civil service board that handles discipline for monitoring police is a huge part of it. They are set up by statute to do a specific job. The first question is, are we properly leveraging them so that we can actually see results? Are we presenting information to them in a way that actually gets the results that we need to? I think that we need to be auditing that. Seriously, this is a bigger issue, so just bear with me. I believe that the best support that we can provide for police is a clean house. We have many, many good police officers who get very frustrated because they see us dropping the ball on things that come to internal accountability. You have people who are living in neighborhoods where they feel like the police are not there to advocate for them and serve and protect as much as to kind of be overseers in a way that feels very hostile. But beyond that, you have like the officers who are saying, hey, something's happening and it's not quite right. What are we going to do about it? And rather than them being able to see a positive result of accountability amongst their peers, they end up leaving. It's not just the pay. They're leaving for some of these other suburban areas in Texas where they see fewer crimes, fewer calls for service per shift, per week even, and they get paid so much more on day one, plus they start off vested with amazing benefits, and they're getting better quality of life for their families. A lot of people become police officers in Shreveport because they want to be a part of making Shreveport better. They come in with a sincere and earnest longing to do that, and they end up feeling like they're being punished for it. I've heard numerous stories about exactly that. Now, you can't keep the streets of Shreveport clean if you can't keep your side of the street clean. This is not to indict police. My father is retired police, but we have to be able to say, we've got to be acting in a way that is above reproach if we are going to be setting a standard for a community that we serve and protect. To that end, I am in favor of an independent police monitor or a citizens review board. But in order to do that, we have to make sure that it meets all of the legal criteria that it needs to meet. Now, you did bring up a good point. I said that it's not just about the police chief and about Sheriff Prater, but they do play a part in it. If you don't have buy-in from Sheriff Prater, he can just kill your entire party. I've had conversations with him. In fact, just a couple of months ago, maybe about 2 weeks after we had the town hall for public safety, I went and I sat down with him and we talked about the idea of a public safety czar. I know it needs to be someone that has the trust of the community, that has good working relationships with police, with Caddo Parish Sheriff, with all of the state police, ATF, FBI, that are all US Marshals, that are all working here together. But depending on that, because they do work together on special task forces completely a lot, and they do share information. But you need someone that can come in, see where the deficits are, and speak to those deficits. To some extent, Sheriff Prater does seem to be on board with that. And he did straight up tell me, he was just like, you're gonna need my buy-in for this to work. And he's absolutely right. He is one of the most powerful law enforcement people in this part of the state. And of course, in the parish. To that end, like I said about working with the council, you have to have that buy-in, you have to be transparent, you have to have trust and respect and say, here's my idea, shoot all the holes through it, but let's figure out something that will work because we all have the same common goal. But where we have to find a baseline, for me, is respect for the community and understanding of the hardship of over-policing that some people feel. And if we need to find the complete data and proof on it, then we need to do that too, so that we have a baseline that says the people in a poor neighborhood deserve to feel just as safe as the people in a rich neighborhood. And that even when they aren't speaking up, we have to have empathy and understand that they want to feel safe just like everybody else. If you don't have that mutual baseline, it's hard to move forward from there. But I'm not afraid of having my ideas shot down. I'm always ready to get right back up and come up with a better idea so that we can all work together. But I definitely think that having a citizens review board or an independent police monitor is something that we should be working toward with all the stakeholders at the table.
All right, and remember, if you have any follow-ups, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask the next question, which is again from Desmond Perkins. What is your plan for stopping the outward migration? I
can't control people. I can control how I respond to people. I can't force people to stay in the community, but I can respond to basically the exit interview that is people moving out of your city, right? One thing that I have studied along with my peers in Reform Shreveport has been the effect of sprawl, the effect of spreading our population thinner and thinner across more acres and more acres of land. And it is a huge tenet in my platform that we cannot grow any more land area and we must fill in what we have. To that end, right now, and Mr. Desmond Perkins, if I'm jumping the shark or chasing this all the way to Mars, in the comments, reel me back in. But I'm going to be a complete nerd for a second. Right now, an organization called Urban 3 is doing analysis of our infrastructure and our tax revenue. They are geotagging tax revenue block by block, along with geotagging the infrastructure block by block, and analyzing where we are getting a return on investment, where the infrastructure is actually being paid for by the tax revenue, and where there's actually tax revenue left over after that infrastructure is paid for, and where we are hemorrhaging money, where we're putting in so much land, so much infrastructure, and paying so much in taxes, but it's not footing the bill because the density is not there, the sustainability is not there because we've overbuilt on land area without trying to create a productive space. Once we have that analysis, we will be able to say, this is where our infrastructure dollars should be priority. The areas where we're getting return on investment, but have not been cared for in a while, those are the areas that we need to be investing in. And when we make those areas nice, not to attract more people to them, but for the people that are already there, where they can see their property values appreciate and they can take part in the great American dream of wealth through property ownership, because in a lot of cases, they really have been waiting a long time to see a return on that investment in the inner city. And there are homeowners there, I promise, I've talked to them. Where we do that for them, then they can have neighbors who will actually have pride in their neighborhood as well. We will have safety in those neighborhoods. They can become mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods that always have someone who is modeling behavior and accountability. And in those cases, you have more young families. And right now the trend is showing that younger families want to live close to where they work. They want walkability for everyone. They want humane conditions for people that don't necessarily want to drive cars. And they want to be able to do something as simple as just, ride their bike or push a stroller to the local ice cream shop, because the infrastructure will sustain that. When you build communities that are mixed income, mixed use, with multiple means of transportation, the economic payoff is so positive. And you're also making community that is attractive, that is happy, and causes people to return to the inner city instead of migrating out. When we get the economic sustainability from that and the happiness benefits from that, you will start to see that more people are coming in, and that other people under normal circumstances could be outpriced. What I would also like to see is policy studies that help us to preserve their abilities to be in their neighborhoods instead of being displaced by gentrification. Because we can learn from the mistakes and the mistakes of other communities. Sorry, I got distracted by seeing the pop-up. We can learn from what other communities have failed at, or we can follow examples where people are getting it right. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but those are the things that I want to see that I think will help us to counter out migration. We can't keep chasing people back in. We can't keep scooping them back in through annexation. Take care of what you have. Improve what you have for the people that are there. We need to be thinking better, not bigger.
All right, thank you. So Robert Trudeau asked, how do we look at city taxes and make a review of them and either justify or question them?
I think that would be something that would need to be, it's a long-term project. I think that a community advisory board with people from various backgrounds analyzing these things would be something that's really important. And keep in mind, the majority of taxes in the city are from sales tax more than just property tax. And I think that the first part really is this urban 3 study, right? And I think that what we can do is look at where our tax money is going, where the revenue is coming in, where can we actually look at reducing things. One thing that we have already reduced in this community, but we have to go back and do a re-up, is when the state said that you can remove a pink tax at the local level on period products and diapers. We did an ordinance that allowed us to make that change, which decreased the sales tax on those items. I think that there is some amount of leeway that we could have, but it's going to mean also working with the state on the things that we can actually adjust in that way. But there are certain things that we can do on our own, but I think it's going to come to probably an independent analysis from some sort of ad hoc commission.
All right, so Jenny Uckland asks, there are limited opportunities for social and economic mobility in Shreveport. What are ways that you would support building additional opportunities, especially for our traditionally marginalized, underserved communities?
I was just talking about this with a state rep at an event. The first thing we have to do when it comes to workforce development is recognize that if children have to meet a certain hierarchy of needs, shelter, clothing, food, before they can start to self-actualize, adults are the same way. To that end, the first thing that I have under my control as mayor is improving environments for people, and that's working with the city council again. A prime opportunity to do what you're suggesting to an extent, hypothetically, would have been using the ARP money. Stay with me for a minute. Okay, so we had X amount of ARP money come in. what I would have liked to have seen us do is work with Louisiana Economic Development, work with the NLEP, the people who are doing any kind of economic development and bringing jobs to this area. And what I would have liked to have done was taking a year to 18 months and take temporary employees into the city. We pay them 40 hours a week at no less than $15 an hour. And they would fill in the gaps in the areas right now where we are really falling behind, whether it's case management for property standards, whether it's doing research for property standards, whether it's working in streets and drainage, working even in solid waste. You get paid the 40 hours, 30 hours of that you are working for the city and you are making the city better. The other 10 hours of that I wanted to put into workforce training, workforce development, with a guarantee that all of the people that were in that class over those 18 months were graduating to guaranteed jobs with the job creators that are coming into our community right now. I think that any opportunity we have where we have funding to do something like that, even if it means that we're able to get grant funding from an outside source, that's the kind of thing that we should be doing. We can, one, fix the issues we have as a community, take a direct opportunity to help make it better, to train people to be able to level up out of those positions and into something else where they can continue to contribute to the city and to their families. I'm open to other ideas like that. I'm open to any opportunity that we have to work with our local colleges, our junior colleges, and our full four-year universities to create opportunities for people to get more job training for the workforce development that we're seeing, the workforce demand that actually exists, which a lot of it is tech focused. I'm willing to see how we can work together to provide opportunities for them, for those facilities, for those institutions, to increase those opportunities, increase promotion of those opportunities, and make sure people don't just have the opportunities to get the education, but the support. Quite often, the people who are having the hardest time, in particular, they're post-incarceration. When you don't have many opportunities for re-entry, you get out of those situations, you get out of jail, you get out of prison, and the pipeline of what you're able to do because of your conviction status means that it's really hard for you to find the new job. Where you have advocates that are working with you hand in hand so that when you start to give up, and you start to feel like you're falling short, and sometimes it can be just as much, it can be a matter of, I had the job interview, I got the job, but it's the first day of the job and the bus ride to get there is an hour. It comes every 30 minutes and I just missed that bus and now I'm giving up. That is something that does happen in our community, but where people have support that can say, hey, you're gonna get there. Hey, here's money for a lift. You're gonna make it to that job today, but tomorrow you're gonna do better. I'm not gonna let you give up on yourself. People have better opportunities. The other thing is that we need to consider ways to incentivize the job creators who might not want to give someone who's been convicted a second chance. It might be that we need to figure out ways that we can incentivize them giving people that second chance.
All right, just so heads up, no rush to anybody. We have 10 more minutes of the official panel. Are you good to go for the next 5 questions, LeVette?
Let me get a sip of water.
All right, and if you guys are good to go in the chat, just let me see some interactivity. Throw, a thumbs up or sure in the chat. I'm gonna ask these next few questions and we'll go as long as LeVette is currently available. But I'm gonna ask the next question and we're gonna keep it going. So Victoria asks, how as a community can we tackle homelessness and encourage food resources for families?
There are so many people working in this space. It's such a good question, but it's not always common knowledge who's doing what and what's really working. So you have Hope Connections, you have Hope House, you have a few other shelters, Providence House. They all have specific things that they do and people that they work with. What's really, really hard is mental health care and people that might be struggling with addiction, having a place where they can go where there's no questions asked. Right now, I'm pretty sure, but if I need to be corrected, someone please do, the shelter that Hope Connections is building, like the additional shelter that they're building on Levy Street, is going to be a no questions asked. We always need more resources for people who are trying to find shelter, who need food. What has been explained to me, but I don't have any actual scientific data on it, is that a lot of times the people who work in that space as professionals use food as a connection to help make a relationship with people, to help them come to the shelter and then possibly be rehabbed and help them to get off the street. That does work for some people. It may not work for everyone, but when people don't have the same understanding about what's going on, you start to have friction. So something that I have seen, and this is a bit of a tangent and I'm sorry, is certain community members that want to reprimand you for handing someone on the street a sandwich. Now you're dehumanizing the person who is hungry and could really use that sandwich, and you're alienating the person that's just trying to do a kind thing because they could. If we can't come to some common understanding, we're distracted by syntax. We're distracted by that conversation instead of actually helping people. So I think that the way you treat the vulnerable is a huge reflection of who you are as a community to that end. And I think that y'all could probably play some sort of game off of how many times I've said to that end at this point. I'm sorry. But when you have empty buildings and you have people sleeping outside of them that need somewhere to stay, if your attitude is, oh, this is a property standards issue, they really need to deal with the homeless people here, instead of what can I do to help? Because it makes no sense that this building is empty while this person is sleeping outside and needs shelter, then that's an indicator of who you are as a community. Hope House used less than $40,000 to rehome 20 people. And all but one managed to stay in housing. And out of those 19, one didn't stay independent, but they were able to rehab to a point where they could conform to being in a standard where they could stay at home with family members. They did it by giving them first and last month's rent. And then they helped them to get jobs. They helped them to keep a case manager that worked with them. They were able to have mental health care, and it worked. So what we should be trying to do is replicate things like that, because the only cure to homelessness is a home. Shelters don't work for everyone because they expect you to conform to a certain standard. Sometimes that standard is religion. Sometimes that standard is sobriety. Whatever it is, there are people who don't fit into that paradigm. And what we need is competent, caring individuals that are willing to meet other people where they are, to get an understanding and help them have dignity in the choices that they're making, so that they can actually join the social contract of living inside. Because I think for the most part, there are very, very few people who really want to be always camping out. Beyond that, as a community, I think that it's important that you give the donations of clothing, of food, of money to the groups that are doing the real good work, whether it's direct impact on people who are living outside to get them inside, or if it's the people that are helping them once they get inside to the next step, like through Nesting Project, who gives furniture and helps people to get their houses together once they're ready for that next step. I think that everyone deserves to have dignity at every point in their lives. I've noticed that within the police department, with the mental health interventions that they've also added homeless help. So there are people who work with the unhoused, who are police officers, that are kind of just tracking what's going on, in part because they're members of this community that just call the police on someone for being outside, which just further dehumanizes them and just isn't necessary. there's no necessarily, it's just not fair. But now you actually have someone keeping record and not keeping tabs to keep tabs on someone, but just knowing who's where and having an understanding, because sometimes they're the ones being harassed. I know of at least one individual who lives outside, who sometimes comes to council meetings, who's really, really sweet. This person has taken to staying out in the downtown area where they're very visible, because when they've gone into shelters, or when they've gone to where people are living in tents, they've been attacked several times. So they want to stay where someone's always got eyes on them. I respect the practicality of it, but it also breaks my heart, because I'm just wondering what would have to happen. What can we do to help this person to want to stay inside? Because it's a person that I think of as being really, really smart, and just needing someone to help them decide what their path needs to be. Let me know if I just rambled on and didn't answer your question, because I realize I've got a lot of thoughts about things like this, and it's just not going to fit into sound bites. I figure if y'all are here as a captive audience, we can have that kind of conversation.
We actually have a couple more questions. Van Lee says, do you anticipate expanding broadband internet access for rural communities as part of the infrastructure improvement?
I think that would be a great thing for us to do. I do love that we have done some assessment on where we have a lack or where we have deserts in broadband. When we talk about rural, there are some areas inside the city that very much do feel like they are kind of rural, like they're definitely on the edges. Where those are inside the city limits, I absolutely want people to have access to broadband. I think that what will work best for us is where we can have fiber in the city, we need to have fiber. Where we can work with the private companies to make sure that we have affordable access for people, we definitely need to do that. I think part of it is working with the Public Services Commission, working with the providers, and just being an advocate for it. But when we say rural, what I'm willing to do is what's within my purview as mayor, which is going to still be just inside the city limits. Now, what benefits the city, like internally, is for us to have really, really, really fast, consistent access to the internet across the city, especially in areas where we want people to live and work, right? So my personal bias is going to be toward the core. Like, I want people in the core to not just have like a perfect neighborhood where you can like bike to get an ice cream cone or walk and push a stroller to an ice cream cone. I want you on both sides of I-49 to be able to run a tech company out of your house if that's what you want to do. Or, you know, just like run a streaming video service where you're making awesome comedic content, even if it's, or just like, okay, you're making skate videos. Like, I want you to be able to have like the best opportunity for success in getting your content out there in a fast, strong connection, because that's economic development for us. Because the thing is, let's say that you really do become like this skateboarding phenom that is literally just uploading content from the corner of Ledbetter and Clanton. Well, if you've got advertisers paying you to support your website, then I'm going to want my piece. I'm going to want that revenue back to the city. And I'm going to probably want to go do a Q&A with you and see you at the skateboard ramp.
All right, so we have a question from Justin. He says, what would you do to, 1, bring more future-proof technology-based jobs here, 2, future-proof Shreveport tech infrastructure, i.e. public Wi-Fi, better 5G coverage, etc.?
Okay. The thing that is most important to us right now is the foundations. We will not have a community to provide that future-proof sort of technology and industrial opportunities if we can't get the foundations right now. I think that the most important thing for the city to do is to create the environment where those things are fertile as far as infrastructure, like making sure that we think of tech infrastructure when we think of regular infrastructure. Those things go hand in hand. If you're digging up a road, you can put the fiber or the conduit right down there, right when you're doing that same work. You're fixing the water, you're fixing the sewer, put that conduit in and make that happen. I think that incentives are an important part of that as well. But I think that the real thing is educating your Chamber of Commerce having the people who consider themselves to be leaders of industry better prepared to seek out those opportunities and to have a strategic plan in place that says, this is what we want, this is how we're going to get it, and here's the trajectory of how that's going to be sustainable. That's not something that I have to do or need to do by myself. It's something that I have to be able to say, the future is going in this direction in order for those things to be sustainable so that we don't see this dip down the way that we did when we put all of our eggs into the oil and gas basket. We have to have that diversity. And that's going to be a matter of not just having young leaders saying, this is what we want and this is what we're going to do. It's going to be a matter of educating everyone that wants to see us thrive so that they are equipped with that vocabulary so that when they are at a conferences, they can say, well, this is what we're doing in Shreveport and we want you to be a part of it. And that doesn't mean that you just have to be, young, vibrant, resilient about technology. I think that there's something that we can do here where the people who have institutional knowledge of where we've had success and where we had failure, if they're at the table, if they're increasing their understanding and their capacity for this and wrapping their brains around it, instead of them becoming obstructionists to it, they become another person that's cheerleading for us to do it and helping us to create sustainable plans so that the next generation doesn't have to dip or leave. They're not having to go to San Francisco or Austin or New York to have those jobs because we're doing the work now to make that sustainable. I can't give you a specific practical element of what I would do outside of that, but know that as a researcher myself, what's really important to me is understanding where our deficits are, what it takes for us to fix those deficits, and then the right people at the table for us to improve on that and then grow from there. Something I say to myself a lot, whether we're talking about infrastructure, technology, economic development, population growth, what we have to be doing is the most good for the most people for the longest time.
All right, so just a few more questions, about 3 more. Zach wanted to follow up on Victoria's question regarding homelessness. Do you see a solution to similar larger cities like LA that pay the rent of homeless people working here? It seems like the Fairmont is mostly empty and could be a solution.
Actually seen a little, in fact, in the last week, I listened to an NPR story about what's going on in Los Angeles, and they're having some mixed successes and some unintended consequences with what they're trying to do. I think that we would need to really revisit where our tax base is and what kind of money we have to put toward that. But it might be that with the Office of Community Development, and a major part of what the Office of Community Development does is make sure that people have sustainable, sanitary, dignified housing at the base level. There have been people who have lost everything in a fire, and there are a couple of nonprofits that do help with this, but we have funds set aside so that if someone has lost everything in a fire, we can put them in a hotel for a month so that they can get stable and then move on from there. We have funds and vouchers that are set aside for people who are one paycheck away from homeless to help them to meet those gaps. We have a certain amount of funding and of advocacy to connect people, like not quite social workers, but just advocates that connect people to the shelters that exist. Honestly, I've myself called up Miss Vernie Howard at Providence House and said, I have someone here who's leaving a certain situation. Can you please help? And all they have to do, they just say yes. I don't know what happens after that. They just say yes, they get the number and they do what they came here to do. But when it comes to the city, to some degree, we're already doing a smaller part of that, but a lot of that comes from grant funding that is specifically from that. And it comes sometimes from housing and urban development. There are community development grants that are federal dollars that are coming here just kind of like automatically to some extent to do that type of work. If it's a matter of recalibrating to put more money toward that, that could be a possibility. But what we would have to do in Shreveport in order to ensure that that is working is make sure that it is data informed and outcome based so that we're not just putting someone in an apartment and then turning our back on them. We have to kind of try to do what Hope House did with their pilot program, where you've got a case manager who is genuinely coming and checking up on you at least once a month for at least a year. We're helping to make sure that you're able to get your job and stay in your job and not have the kind of hiccups hiccups that could end up causing you to be back on the street, the mental health care pieces of that, so that people have support. Or we're like putting you in a house, putting you in an apartment. We can't just shut our back. We turn around and just say, okay, well, good luck with that. And then we drop the ball. That doesn't work either. So I can say that there's some pieces that we're already doing, not to the scale of what Los Angeles is doing. Los Angeles has more money than we do, but when we have knowledge of where we have access to those funds, if it's a matter of us recalibrating what we're doing so that we can do more, a pilot that can show that it could actually work is definitely something I would be interested in considering.
All righty. So actually there's one more question. How would you expand or hire for the SPD and SFD dispatch departments, and also the surrounding admin departments that have a high level of turnover and retirement?
I need you, let me look, I need to read that one.
So that's Justin's question. He asked it at 150. We'll just scroll up a bit.
Hire for SPD and SFD dispatch departments specifically. Justin, I think that you've stumped me, because I didn't understand that we were having such a high level of turnover, specifically in dispatch departments. Now, they all work at Caddo 911 together, and my dad actually worked there at one point in his life as an SPD officer. I think that when we talk about turnover, in any department, when you have high turnover, what you have is a management and leadership issue, and that will require an HR audit to see what's going on, possibly some exit interviews to figure out why people are not happy staying in those jobs. If it's a matter of the call volume, if it's a matter of a stress level, then there might need to also be the solutions as far as wraparound services to make sure that people have the support that they need for doing a high stress job. But beyond that, it's something that I'm going to have to probably think about for a minute, do some research, and then I can message you back about it if that's okay. When we talk about admin turnover, what I've been seeing a lot of is that we have these gaps. Now, we have a lot of higher level people that get to a certain area where they could retire, but they're not retiring. You've got a lot of people that want to climb the ladder, but they get stuck. Sometimes you end up losing these people in the middle. And by the time these people are ready to go, you don't have the institutional knowledge between the rookies and the senior level to actually fill the gaps and have them properly trained and mature enough to do the jobs. And I wonder if we're not having some of that right now at every level. I do have access to someone who does a significant amount of corporate HR, who has pulled the records on our turnover, not just in SPD, but across the board, and really just on our administrative structure across the board. And one thing that we can say about us is that we're top heavy. We have a whole lot of people in management being chefs and not necessarily enough people being cooks. So at a certain point, when the burden is on you and there's not enough of you to take on that burden, you end up with burnout. That's a really big part of what might be happening, in particular with dispatch. So it's not just about recruiting good people and making sure that they're there and trying to stay. It's making sure that the right people are managing them, that the pay is comparable to where they could get somewhere else, and that they have the kind of support for doing something in a stressful environment that they need.
All right, Justin says that's exactly what he was speaking of. So I think you landed right where you needed to. That's all of our questions. Do you have anything that you'd like to leave the guests with today?
There's something else from Trudeau, a lumpy street. Line Avenue is lumpy. What do we do? Well, because Line Avenue in parts is like a state street too, we need to work with the state to just do the whole thing over. I think it's going to take some money. I'm just going to tell you that just yesterday, Stephen and I were driving around. Stephen was driving, and I was just so sad because we were on Line Avenue, and it wasn't anything about Stephen's driving. It was the street. What frustrates me about it is where I can see where there's been a major cut for utilities, and that not all utility companies are hiring the same private contractors to consistently do good, even work. We've had to actually have work redone on Line Avenue. And I think because of the length of it and how high traffic it is, the issue becomes, how do you redo a street like that and have it fortified enough that you can actually like leave it alone for a while and make sure that it's not going to need a lot of repair? And the other part of that is, if we're going to dig the whole street up, gosh doggone it, can all the utilities that need to get under that street all work together to do what they need to do so that they don't come in and tear up our street once we get it fixed? Because that's a lot of the problem.
All right, I'll give a really quick second to see if anyone has any more follow-ups, any more questions. We are over time, but we will be hosting more of these online forums and town halls. And just so you can all be reminded, our next meet and greet opportunity / forum will be this Sunday, that's tomorrow at 4 p.m. at LSUS. This will be the PACE Mayoral Forum. We'll have yard signs, push cards, and so much more. LeVette's happy, sunshiny, smiling face. We will be there. So if you'd like to ask more of the candidate, you can see us tomorrow. But be sure to go to LeVetteFuller.com. That's LeVetteFuller.com to sign up to volunteer, donate, or check out all the events that we'll have coming up. That's the best way to stay up with us. And we will be publishing every single time you can meet up with LeVette or any of our team members. So with that said, I'm going to pass it back to LeVette for some final words so I don't see any more questions coming, and then we will hop out today.
I'll just say thank you for participating. Even if you didn't ask a question, I hope that any concerns or curiosity you had was satisfied and that you're still on Team LeVette and that you're ready to be a part of this movement so that we can have the community that we deserve. Thank you for spending some of your Saturday with me, and I hope to see you in real life really soon.